So good morning. I think there are still a few people joining, but that's okay, because I won't be saying anything too important in the next minute, so people can continue to join in. So you're all very welcome to webinar 2. Today we're going to be looking at crisis communication for internal and external audiences. It's a slightly different format for those of you who were with us on Monday. Today we have 2 speakers, so we're doing more of a deep dive into that particular topic. The notes, speaking of Monday's webinar, for anyone who wasn't with us on Monday, my name is Eilish O'Leary. I'm from the Graduate Business School in Griffith College, and you are most welcome. If you would like to catch up on what we covered on Monday, the video and all of the slides from our speakers on Monday are now up on the course page on griffith.ie. My contact details and those of Michael Bosenay, who's coordinating this program with me, are also on that website, so do feel free to get in touch with us at any stage. So to look at our topic today, we have 2 excellent speakers. We have Nigel Heenan, Managing Director at Heenan, one of Ireland's leading strategic communications consultancies. And we also have Aoife O'Donnell, founder of Vital Communications and one of our own in Griffith College, as she is a lecturer for our masters and undergraduate students in our media faculty. So we are delighted to have the 2 of them with us today. I know both Nigel and Aoife are keen to have a very interactive session. So again, we won't have a comments function during today's webinar, but we would ask you to use the Q&A button to ask any questions that you have. So through Q&A, you will be able to post any queries that you have for our speakers, or indeed for myself and Michael, and we will be having Q&A and interaction throughout today's session. So slightly different format, as I said, to Monday. Okay, so without further ado, if you do have any queries, as I said, please come in through the Q&A. I'm going to hand you over now to Aoife O'Donnell to start off our session. Thank you, Aoife.
Thank you, Eilish. So you're very welcome, everybody, today to discuss crisis communications. And it's an area we're obviously all pretty much in a crisis at the moment if we're in business. So as Eilish said, I'm a lecturer in public relations in Griffith College, and I'm also a communications consultant in healthcare in Vital Communications. And Nigel Heenan is going to lead us through a talk on crisis communications. Nigel is the managing director of Heenan's Strategic Communications, and it's one of the longest standing public relations communications agencies in the country. So we're very lucky to have him today. And we're very keen. I mean, we find in these sessions that the questions and answers are really beneficial to people, and people really engage, especially when it comes to something like crisis. And you're all, probably going through your own individual issues. We all have similar issues, but you have your own individual issues, I'm sure. So we'd encourage you to be as interactive, as engaged as possible. We'll be watching the questions coming in, and we'll aim to address your questions at the end of Nigel's session. So to hand over to Nigel now. Thanks, Nigel.
Aoife and Eilish, thank you very much. And first of all, nice to meet everybody virtually. And I hope you're all safe and well at this time. It's an extraordinary time that it is, unique. And I also hope that the technology is working for everybody and you can hear me and see me if you wish. I'd like to thank Griffith College and ISME for the opportunity to discuss the communications response to a crisis in the particular context of the crisis we are all now in, coronavirus COVID-19. I'm Nigel Heenan. I run a business called Heenan. It's a strategic communications consultancy. We ourselves are an SME, but we also have considerable experience in crisis communications. After considering the best way to deliver some pointers in the context of coronavirus COVID-19, and hopefully to make it relevant for you, I'm going to give a talk this morning of 2 halves, probably over 30 minutes in totality, and maybe a little more. And then, as Aoife said, and Eilish, certainly happy to engage in any questions. So the first part of the talk is a more general introduction to a crisis, and more specifically to communications in a crisis and how that might impact an SME, a company like your organization. And we've also witnessed, if you wish, over recent weeks, how important communications is. The second part, in a little while, will be about what you as an SME might do in terms of communications in response to the crisis that you're now likely in the midst of at this time. So starting off, let us first, in the first instance, look at what a crisis is. I've tried to focus, as I said, on how It might be relevant to smaller organizations in business. So it is an important fact that a crisis and how it is managed will have a direct bearing on a company's reputation. Now, over the years, I've looked at numerous definitions for a crisis. Some of them are quite wordy, so I've arrived at the following hybrid which for me best describes a crisis. A crisis is any event that can lead to an unstable or dangerous situation. It is deemed to be negative and often occurs abruptly with little or no warning. Now, that definition, if you wish, contains some concerning words for anybody in business. An unstable situation, something that's deemed to be negative, something that occurs abruptly with little or no warning. These are all, if you like, scenarios and situations that anybody running or operating a business wants to avoid. But unfortunately, they happen on an ongoing and frequent basis. Also, when you apply the definition to coronavirus COVID-19, you can see that it probably makes sense. So how do you know you have a crisis? And the types of crises large or small might face, companies large or small might face are numerous and can vary depending on what you do. Are you in the service sector or in production? What type of production are you in? Are you in food production? Are you producing hardware? So on and so forth. So let's have a quick look at what might happen. And I'm going to go through some, if you wish, crisis examples now. And it's not a definitive list, but it's, if you wish, an indicative list of the type of crisis that companies might find they're facing, so to speak. So, and I've broken it down into two, if you like, operational crisis and corporate or company crisis. So let's say under the operational heading, we might have crises in areas such as HR, human resources. What can happen? What type of crisis can happen under the HR heading? Well, industrial arrest or a strike, a charge of harassment, an unfair dismissal case, or even redundancy. The environment. Are you in the production process of some sort? Now, maybe a leak from a plant into the water supply chain or a local river or lake, emissions from the plant, an odor issue or noise pollution arising from the manufacturing process. Health and safety is another area. An accident at the production line, a wrongly labeled produce, a warning or sanction for non-compliance by a regulator. The planning process. This can be another minefield for companies looking to expand. Planning application, objections, escalation to onboard planola, and so on. If a development is rejected, maybe a company's expansion plans and future success are put in jeopardy. So yes, it has a crisis. Or a serious customer complaint. And this probably resonates true for somebody possibly in the hospitality or restaurant sector, where somebody makes a very bad complaint about service or food or something like that. Then that creates a big issue for the deliverer, the person or in company delivering that service. Then, so there's some, if you wish, operational type of crisis an organization might face. Then at a corporate or a company level, there are a range of other crises that companies face. So say, for example, in the area of governance, for example, infringement of the Companies Act, such as misstatement of accounts, non-compliance in relation to tax matters, or even criminal areas of embezzlement and fraud. Litigation. Litigation is another area that anyone in business needs to be mindful of, either as a plaintiff or a defendant. It can be extremely expensive, and it is also public. Court hearings are open season for the media and can lead to high profile yet unwanted exposure for a business. And anybody operating an SME, a small business, will know what their budget is like and what their P&L management is like, and throw layer litigation on top of that, and it could create issues in terms of a company's profitability. And then a financial crisis. Maybe this is the worst type of crisis for a business owner, and a lot of business owners are now facing this crisis because of the situation we're in. Sometimes it's created by cash flow issues. It can have a deeper and more detrimental impact on the business, resulting in insolvency, and is there a risk of administration or receivership? So there are numerous other examples that can have a significant detrimental impact on a business, lead to business interruption, and impact negatively on a company's reputation and its profitability. So before moving forward, and sometimes there's a debate, if you like, within the communication sector around issue management and crisis management. So, and there is a distinction between an issue and a crisis. So before moving forward and talking further about a crisis, I'd like to spend a brief moment on the difference between an issue and a crisis. There can be issues across some of the headings I've just mentioned, and most times they can be resolved at a localized level. Often they can be successfully addressed by proactive response and good decision making. However, if not properly addressed, they can become a crisis. We might give an example, for example, in the HR or employee space, for example. So if there is a HR issue and you do have a problem with employees, and that problem is resolved through a negotiation process, the issue has been managed and you move on. However, if the issue hasn't been managed and the problem remains or escalates, it could well become a strike. But you're now in a crisis situation, and if you're manufacturing a product or providing a service, and all of a sudden your employees aren't working, you can't fulfill your customer requirements or orders. So you have a big problem, and you're in a crisis situation. Talk very briefly about larger companies and how they manage or what their approach to crises are, and some of them are very, very highly resourced. So many larger companies are well calibrated to deal with a crisis. They anticipate the areas of risk across their business. They scope out possible crisis scenarios that might emerge. They have a team in place to manage the situation should one arise. And one of the benefits of this is that when an issue arises, there's every good chance it will be properly dealt with and resolved before escalating to a crisis. SMEs, as most of you will know, however, don't have the same resources. So they have to respond more organically when a crisis occurs or happens. So let's say a crisis does happen. Something has happened in a company. Maybe employees have downed tools and you have a strike. You've been served with a notice for a health and safety closure notice for a health and safety reason. You've been named and shamed in the national press for being in non-compliance with a regulatory obligation, or there's been a bad accident on your site, or maybe having lost a major contract, you're now faced with having to make people redundant. Any of these or scenarios like them are described in business terms as a crisis. You might say a slap on the wrist from a regulator is just that. However, when a potential customer, say from Germany, arrives for a meeting on the same day as the newspaper article that calls you out, it might create a sense of unease. While you might still win the contract, your negotiating power has been somewhat reduced because of the embarrassment. So maybe you get the contract, but you might make less of a return or less of a profit. Or your company is going very, very well. You're winning new orders, and to fulfill the new orders, you need to recruit new staff. All of a sudden you have a strike in your hands. So you're looking to recruit staff, but you have a strike at the same time. So what is that telling the employment market? So as well as causing business damage, scenarios like these will damage a company's reputation. But these type of scenarios actually happen day in, day out, up and down the country, and how they're responded to has a central bearing on the business and its reputation as it moves forward. Sometimes the proposed response and how a crisis is managed can in fact lead to an enhanced reputation for an organization. And I think you probably will concur with me when we have a look at the crisis we're now in, and if you wish, in terms of the government, the Taoiseach, the HSE, the wider public services, and even some in the private sector, their response to coronavirus COVID-19 has led to enhanced reputations because of their management of the crisis. As a business proprietor or a managing director, the ultimate responsibility will be with you in responding to and managing the crisis. You are vested in the business, you are the key decision maker, and you are ultimately responsible for the reputation of the business. But before looking now at some suggested steps you might take if you find yourself in that crisis situation, I'm going to address some of the pitfalls that might make the situation worse. So a crisis arises in your organization, and these are some of the things that maybe you shouldn't engage in should that happen. But what are the things to avoid in a crisis? Denial. First and foremost, denial. Denial is something in ordinary living that can be a dangerous thing. But when it comes to, if you wish, a company that's in a crisis, it can be hazardous. Failing to recognize there is a problem is a potential recipe for disaster, and also the consequences can be very detrimental to the business. Unfortunately, denial is also a sign, if you wish, of weak management. Avoid speculation. If a crisis happens, do not rely on anecdotal information or hearsay if a crisis occurs. Make sure you get to the bottom of the issue and deal in real facts. You can only build a recovery roadmap on the basis of real facts. Limited disclosure is also something that human nature can kick in a crisis. And some people try and behave, if you wish, humanly, and maybe they don't want to declare everything for fear of the finger pointing at them. So limited disclosure is something that I've seen now and again that can be hurtful to an organization. So don't try and bury or hide material elements of the situation in the hope that they won't be found out. There's every chance that all the material facts will eventually emerge, therefore lengthening the period of reputational damage and possibly commercial damage to the company. But while initial reputational damage might be hurtful to an organization, the sooner it is open about what has happened, the sooner it can commence its road to recovery and focus on a solution. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a short while. Don't stay in the crisis, and I think this is important. This is a mindset issue, if you wish. The longer you spend time on the problem, the longer it will last. Yes, it's really important to acknowledge it, to understand precisely what has happened, excuse me, and precisely how it has happened. But it's so important that you basically come up with a fit-for-purpose solution and its delivery. Don't dwell in the crisis, start looking at the solution. Sharing information. Avoid being press-ganged into acknowledging the issue or providing details to the media or any third party until you're absolutely certain of the facts. We'll come to media again as well in a short while. Also, in the unfortunate case of an accident or injury, your first obligation, or a company's first obligation, is always to communicate to the individual's family. They have to be informed ahead of any media engagement. So they're important things. Don't be forced into giving information until you're absolutely ready to give that information. But at the same time, you should be relatively efficient about it. Mind your emotions. A crisis can bring out the best or worst in an individual. The spontaneous reaction of somebody is to start pointing the finger and initiating a blame game. That might be something for another day, but it's certainly not going to help resolve the issue that has occurred, or the crisis that has occurred, I should say. So there are some of the pitfalls to just be aware of in terms of crisis, and human nature does come into play a lot of the time when a crisis happens, and possibly more so for a smaller company because it's owner managed and the owner is very much vested in the company. So that crisis occurs, something bad happens in our organization. What steps should we or do we take? I think first and foremost, you have to get to the bottom of the matter and understand precisely what has happened. To consider even on an initial basis, how you might respond to the crisis, you have to know precisely what it is, and as soon as you can, understand how and why it has happened. That's important, knowledge about the crisis. Then the team you have, what sort of team are you going to have in terms of building a response to the crisis? You will know, as a business owner, you likely know your own trusted colleagues and who your own trusted colleagues and advisors are, and who will support you, and you're happy to call on to support you in a crisis. You want to build a small but effective team that understands the issue. It can be counterproductive and inefficient to have too many people at the table, and I've seen evidence of this a number of times, and particularly when it comes to decision making. And as a business owner, anybody owning a business should take a leading role in a crisis, particularly in an SME scenario. Decisiveness, and I just alluded to this, sometimes good decisions have to be made really quickly in a crisis. It can be damaging to spend too much time reaching a vital decision. So that's one of the reasons to keep the circle of decision making tight in numbers. Stakeholders, audiences. Understand the stakeholders and audiences the crisis is relevant to. Staff, customers, and in the unfortunate case of an accident, first and foremost, family members. You may have a statutory obligation also to inform a regulatory authority for a breach caused by the crisis. For example, the Health and Safety Authority, the Data Protection Commissioner, or the EPA, and there are numerous others. Depending on the company or issue, the media might be on your list, but it may not. Transparency is very, very important in a crisis. And I talked a little bit a minute ago about sort of half disclosure. Be open and honest about the situation, no matter how difficult it might be. So do share the hard facts in your communication and take the short-term reputational hit. While it not seem like it at the time, your transparency is actually a sign of your recovery from the crisis has already started. It's also a sign of good management. It's a sign of maturity. And then, and this is very important, messaging. Once you have the key initial first response stages completed to a crisis, and they should be completed really quickly, you should then have a look at your messaging. What are the key messages that you want to prepare in response to the crisis, and who are the audiences that they're going to be shared with? And we'll talk about messaging in a minute. Then we talk about a moment for the media. It's possible that journalists will contact you for a comment or a statement, but do not respond until you are ready. They're doing their job, but you have to do yours too, and you have to be sure of the facts. They might report about the incident, but they'll want to be careful and want to be factual as well. But once you are in a position, you can provide an initial statement that should be based on the following points. The key messages in response to a crisis, certainly on an initial basis, for media or for other audiences, are to acknowledge something has happened, note that you're examining the reason or the cause of the crisis, and you have informed the relevant authority, if that's appropriate, and you are taking steps to consider your response. So that's a respectful initial communications response to a crisis if it has occurred in your organization. It's demonstrating that you are being open about the issue. You're not hiding or burying your head under the sand about the issue. You're already examining the reason. You've informed the people you should have to inform about the issue, and you're taking steps to consider your response to the issue. It's showing that you are managing the crisis and you're in control of it. So that in itself is if you like, a note of confidence in your ability in terms of what you were doing. And that it's a tried and tested, if you wish, hierarchy of messaging for a media statement in a crisis situation. Like every organization that I've seen, that has a crisis, probably larger organizations, but any organization, when they do issue a statement acknowledging they have a crisis, it's more or less around the 4 points that I just mentioned there. And in terms of the media, it might be disconcerting that while you have a crisis in your business you're trying to resolve, you do have to dedicate time and attention to dealing with media inquiries. And you might see that as an interference or an interruption in your management of the situation. But their job is to report news in the public interest. And if they have a story on your company, you need to prepare to protect your company's reputation. But you also need to ensure, and this is important, that any reporting on your business is factual and accurate. And sometimes it does happen is that information gets out into the ether. It could be by social media. It could be by, if you like, a third party, maybe not immediately involved in the crisis, but who might know your organization. They may say something to a journalist that isn't entirely accurate. So you have to be very careful that reports in your company are factual and accurate. It's all about protecting your reputation as well. So it's possible a matter, and sometimes companies do get a little bit lucky, it's possible a matter won't become public, which is helpful in terms of reputation, but it's also beneficial in terms of allowing management to focus on the issues and the solution. So that bit of luck can be helpful, and I've seen on a number of occasions, if you wish, issues or crises do happen in client organizations, but they basically come and go, and they're consigned to the past without anybody knowing about them. It happens across all organizations all the time. But sometimes also it's worth considering a proactive approach in the media. It doesn't have to be reactive all the time. If the crisis is a significant one, such as the accident referred to, or maybe a number of layoffs to employees. It's better that the company proactively engages with the media and gets its messaging and communications out there in the first instance. The reason, a simple reason, is the story is very likely to become public in any case, and rather than being on the back foot and reactive, the company can be upfront, factual and honest. And this also allows for better overall management of the issue in terms of communications moving forward. You're also you're opening and creating a dialogue with those journalists that are interested, and you're briefing them as the issue evolves, so to speak. And then social media is also a factor. And in fact, in this day and age, social media can be the initial source of the information for the mainstream media. The reporter has seen something on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or whatever platform it might be, and you get that phone call. But you have to be careful in terms of engagement on social media. For one thing, you don't really have the time in a crisis situation to spend on social media engagement. Do, however, post any statements you are proactively sharing with the mainstream media on your usual company platforms. It may not be necessary to engage in social media other than if you feel strongly about it, to correct factual errors by credible named sources. And when you have the time, larger companies, that what I just said would seem strange to larger companies because they're very well resourced, highly calibrated, if you wish, social media communications facilities in place. So they will have their own way, if you like, of dealing with social media, so to speak, in crisis. But another thing to consider is should the matter be noted on the company website or your LinkedIn page or your other platforms? If it's a short-lived crisis, if it's a crisis if it's a sort of a 24 or 48-hour wonder, it goes away very quickly, maybe not necessary. But if it's something that's going to last for a while and it's going to be there for a week or a few weeks, maybe you should put postings on your website and your other platforms about it. And maybe that, the initial posting would be that 4-point statement we looked at a little while ago. So most times when a crisis is passed, it's back to business as usual. Large companies will have debriefs and learning sessions on what worked and what didn't work and so on. They will update their crisis plan, but SMEs probably have the next customer waiting at the door. But no harm to keep a note of what has happened, the decisions made and the recovery actions. So you're like, that is a very quick overview of a crisis and how you as an SME might respond if a crisis occurs in your organization. Remember, your primary responsibility is your business and its reputation. That's the first part, if you like, of the talk. And now the second part is very much related to where we are at this moment in time during coronavirus and COVID-19. And I'm going to spend a few minutes discussing with you or talking with you what you as a company can do in the face of the crisis that we are in. Again, as Aoife and Eilish said at the top of the meeting, happy to respond to any questions on this segment as well. But just to give a little context, and I think it's no harm to give context to the crisis or the scale of the crisis we're in at the moment, which is coronavirus, COVID-19. Depending on your age, you might recall huge crises in the past, for example, terrorist acts and a lot of killings in Northern Ireland, 2 Gulf Wars, the Twin Towers attack on 9/11, the global economic collapse of 2007, 2008, and the austerity that followed. But never before, I remember 9/11, it's very vivid for me. And for me, and I think for a lot of people, the world literally stood still for a week or 10 days after that happened. It was such a spectacular terrorist atrocity. But I think never before have we been asked to abandon our workplace unless absolutely necessary, or to stay in our homes, and in many cases, unfortunately, observe as our business has been forced to a standstill. All for a good reason, but at the same time, the key evidence is in the numbers that have been cast into unemployment. We've gone from 4.8% to 17% at the end of March, and the central bank last week suggesting that we might reach 25% in the summer. So it's going from 4.8% to 25% in a remarkable increase in unemployment. But optimistic forecasts are also telling us that we could be back to 10% at the end of the year. 10% is much better than 25% or 17%, but it's still a lot of failed enterprises. So a lot of people have a very difficult situation. It sounds grim, but at the same time, there's a huge amount of acceptance that it is unavoidable. Also, the supports that have been put in place by the state may well serve to keep some companies on track. But how can you as an SME engage with your audiences during this difficult period? There are a mix of companies with a range of different challenges. On the positive side, technology is helping companies to enable them to and their employees to work remotely. We're engaging remotely here this morning, and to operate on a business as usual basis, while other businesses are closed, but hope to be back soon. So while there will be regretfully commercial casualties, many businesses will recover. So whatever your situation might be, you can look at communications response to inform your audiences in the appropriate manner about where you are at this time. So, and we'll have a quick look, if you wish, at communication strategy. So when looking at communications in any situation, crisis or otherwise, you should follow a simple process and build a strategy. And the key elements in the strategy, there are two key elements, if you wish, and basically they are defining what you want to say and who you want to say it to. In other words, your key messages and your audiences. So first look at messaging in the current context and some of the things that you or other companies might be saying at this particular time. At your office, our facility has closed, but you are working remotely and it is business as usual. Maybe you have reshaped your business offering our service to adapt to the demands in the market created by the crisis. That's an important message. And a number of we've all seen evidence over the last 3 or 4 weeks of companies that have successfully done that, and that's very, very good. It's very creative. You're temporarily closed due to coronavirus, but you will be back. Or on the worst case scenario, you've had to close down. And this is really, it's difficult to be positive in this circumstance. But maybe a message to simply keep in touch with your contacts, as no doubt you'll be back in some capacity in future. And a positive message, remember, is infectious. So who are your key audiences at this time? And depending on who you are and what you do, are you a production company? And again, going back, what type of production? You know, is it hardware? Is it food production? Are you a service company? What type of service company are you? Are you providing a direct consumer service? For example, do you own a salon? Or are you a service? Are you a law firm? You're providing a sort of a corporate service, so to speak. So there are different types of audiences for different types of companies in production and service as well. So I think all SMEs, but most SMEs will have, some of the smaller ones might, but certainly a lot of SMEs will have staff. So first and foremost, keep your staff up to date with the status of the business and engage where possible with customer activity. Communicate with them by email, call them, just have a one-on-one call with them on the phone, or hold briefing sessions on platforms such as this one, or Skype or Google Hangouts or other platforms that are available. Customers, keep in contact with your customers. If you're conducting business with them still, that's great. But if things have slowed down, make an effort at contacting them to express your support for them in this difficult time. And then suppliers, let them know the status of your business at this time and what level of support you may or may not need. They too are in difficulty and need some clarity for their own purposes of planning. So depending on the nature of the relationships you have with your audiences, you can choose what you believe is an appropriate method to contact them. And I've seen a range of communications over the past 2 or 3 weeks, and I think we probably all have, from a variety of companies in all sorts of situations. But a couple of communications I saw resonated with me, and I thought they were very, very good examples of, if you like, customer or audience engagement. I received an email on the 31st of March. It was probably a Mailchimp email. It was from a hotel that's now closed due to a crisis. But the tone and spirit of the email was uplifting. And it reads, #here for you. Greetings from the Park Hotel, Kenmare. As we look out into a beautiful spring day, our gardens coming into bloom and lambs appearing in the fields, we are feeling at one with nature. Like you, we are reflecting on what is most important: family, friends, home, and health. We are thinking of you, our valued guests, and hope this note finds you well. When you are ready to venture out, we are here for you, ready to extend the same warm and welcoming hospitality that you have come to know and expect. We sincerely appreciate your support and wish you an abundance of health and happiness. The team at the Park Hotel, Kenmare. Now, that was, I thought, a fabulous email from a company that has closed, that likely has had to lay a lot of staff off. It doesn't know when it's going to reopen, but it was still, if you like, thoughtful and confident enough to reach out to its audiences with a message like that. And I thought it was a really, really sort of almost inspiring message to get. So then another message that resonated with me was by Datalex. Now, Datalex is a larger firm. It's quoted, it's a stock exchange quoted company. It's had its issues itself over the last year or so. But the Datalex's customer base is the aviation sector, it's airlines, so to speak. And so that's a company that's consequently facing a really difficult time as well. So Datalex posted a very, very well-worded message on its website, and it talked about their priority remaining the health, safety and well-being of their customers, their employees and the wider community, that they were following government guidelines. They're continuing to support their incredible airline and travel retail customers, and so on and so forth. I thought it was a very, very positive message from a company also, if you like, going through a very, very challenging period. So there's just a couple of examples. So, as we're well into the crisis, I'm sure many of you will have by now produced similar communications and other related initiatives. However, here are some of the things you can do. So, for example, your website. If there are interruptions to your business, post an appropriate message on the homepage of your website. Social media platforms. If your office is closed, place a notice on your social media platforms. Inform your stakeholders or audiences of your status. You're not trading at this time, or you're open for business and providing a full service remotely. So even if there is no impact on your business and you are continuing to produce or provide a service, you should note that you are working as normal and you're open for business. Social media is also a quick and efficient way to engage audiences. Strategies can vary depending on the platform you use and interesting content. Sometimes being supported with good imagery can have a positive impact also. It's a great way of keeping in touch with contacts and demonstrating proactivity. However, it does require consideration, and the best approach is to come up with 2 or 3 posts a week, plan them and post at good intervals. And this can be repeated on a weekly basis. Some companies also are using social media to create engagement for their employees by asking the employees to participate in the social media activity or to operate or manage the social media function. And there's some very, very creative, if you like, employee participation in social media activity at this time, but it's also demonstrating good, if you like, good behavior by the company that employs them. In terms of platforms, LinkedIn is probably the key B2B platform for engagement. And a cursory examination or look at LinkedIn just now, to have a look today after this, you'll see some really good ideas around the type of content that is being currently produced. However, you need to make any postings unique to you individually or your business or sector to keep it engaging and relevant. Some posts, and you can see them yourself, which are the good posts and aren't good posts. Some of them are quite corporate and quite flat, but some of them are quite personal, either on a corporate or a personal level, and they're engaging posts. Video, again, looking at LinkedIn or other platforms, you'll note that video has become more prevalent at this time, and people are producing videos about how their companies are responding to coronavirus, and also about their personal experience. And so videos can have multiple uses across social media platforms, as you know. Mailchimp, probably like the one I got from the hotel in Kenmare, create a Mailchimp email to your customers and wider customer base to update them on your status and provide them with a clear reminder you are present, irrespective of if you're operational or not. Keeping in contact is a really good thing to do. Media communications. If media communications is something your company engages in, you should consider it, but only on the basis you have something that is of interest to say. Like in the current environment, content and tone will be very, very important. And journalists frequently use the term, and colleagues in the communications business will often be contacted by a journalist about a client matter, and we might want to defend the situation, but the journalist will say it's in the public interest. So I think that's a good, if you like, barometer at this time. If you want to issue a media statement, is it in the public interest, so to speak? So also, you know, if you're an SME outside Dublin, it might be easier to achieve some publicity because you have a sort of a core local media in your county. Each county has its own weekly newspaper, and in some cases 2 or 3 newspapers. Each county has a local radio station, and now, from what I can ascertain, each county has its own online news portal as well. So they're all looking for interesting localized content. Again, use the same sort of rule of thumb. Is the content interesting? Do you have something to say that is of interest, or is it in the public interest? And you know, if you do, then it's something to consider. Also, we talked about imagery earlier on. When you are engaging with the media, imagery can also be very good. So a photograph, certainly, or if you're sort of want to explain or to sort of demonstrate a product or a service, maybe a good infographic as well is something that you can share with the media, depending on what the story relates to. So just some examples of what we've done here as a company since the outbreak or since the onset, if you wish, of remote working. I think we're now in our 4th week of remote working. At the very outset, we sent a note to clients to say that we are remote working, but we are operating as normal, and if they had any particular requirements to contact us. We posted a similar note across our social media platforms. Then we did an audit of client websites and where appropriate suggested to particular clients that they might want to, if you like, update their websites to mark their status in the context of coronavirus, COVID-19. And that was a sort of an example of engagement, so to speak. And then again, in terms of client engagement, media training, our media interviews have markedly changed in the last 4 weeks. And media interviews are now, an awful lot of media interviews are being conducted by Skype. So our head of media training prepared a note for all clients on how to engage in a media interview over Skype, and we shared that with all of our clients. And then in terms of the internal audience, the team, there's a daily check-in call every morning at 9:30 with the core team, and then every Wednesday we have a full team call over the Zoom platform. So with a little thought and not much expense, you can come up with a range of good initiatives to create engagement with your customers and others at this time. And remember, make sure you define your key messages and know who the audiences, you know who your audiences are. So hopefully I have noted something in both parts of the talk around a more general talk about crisis communications and a more specific talk about what you might do now in the context of coronavirus. So thank you for listening, and I'm happy now to hand you back to Aoife.
Thanks, Nigel. Thank you very much. That was very interesting. So we're just going to go through some questions, if that's okay. There's some questions coming in here now at the moment. Firstly, there's a question in about GDPR. So GDPR restricts general communications to customers without having their consent, obviously. So would you have any advice on how companies can manage this challenge? So if they need to update their customers, how do they manage the GDPR challenges?
Yeah, well, I'm not an authority on GDPR other than the regulations you have. Over the last, I suppose, 3 or 4 weeks, we've all seen areas of, the area of data come into question in the context of the emergency we are in. But in terms of GDPR, for me, the rule of thumb is not to engage with an audience unless you have their permission of the audience, so to speak. But don't engage with somebody unless you have their permission. So I think you need somebody's permission to engage with them before you engage with them under GDPR guidelines, particularly in the electronic media form.
Okay, thank you. So related to that question as well, and there's been quite a bit in the media about this in recent weeks for obvious reasons. So would you, in relation to Zoom, the platform that we're on now at the moment, would you recommend moving off Zoom to a more secure communications tool, like say, for example, Microsoft Teams? Yeah, because there's obviously been a huge amount of media concerns about Zoom and different apps such as House Party and all these new, not new, but new to some people, tools that people are using to remotely work.
Yeah, I think it basically what works for a particular organization and how comfortable it is. We have one client that I saw an email, that they're quite a large corporate. I saw an email from them on Monday to their wider team, so basically banning, if you wish, engagement on Zoom. I'm personally not concerned about it from my own point of view, and we've used other platforms as well. I learned of a new platform the other day. It's very similar to Zoom. I hadn't heard about it before. It's called Blue Jeans, and it really works for me. It's fit for purpose. But if companies are if you wish, concerned about their security, I think it's something they probably want to investigate more and then make a decision.
Okay, and just to add to that, I work in the field of healthcare communications, and I know for a fact that there's a lot of people in the medical profession who are using an encrypted version of Zoom. So there is some way of encrypting, of using a secure platform for Zoom, I think. So it would be interesting to maybe look into that. Another question there, Nigel, just in terms of your own experience. I mean, you've obviously been dealing with crises throughout your career, big and small, for small, medium-sized enterprises and larger enterprises, as we know. Can you give an example maybe of a crisis that you were involved in that worked out well or that was handled well in terms of the
it's very difficult. It's very difficult to say any crisis is handled well. The best thing about a crisis is when it goes away, so to speak. But we've been involved, I'd say, from an SME or a smaller business point of view, say in the last couple of years, last year we were involved for a small landlord and a very small landlord / pension fund. They owned a couple of properties in central Dublin, and there was this sort of take back the city, if you like, campaign where their premises were occupied, so on and so forth. So we worked for them at that time. Another small business, it was this very small operator. I think it was a year and a half ago. I won't name the county, but it was a small operator of 4 wind turbines, so to speak. So it was a very small wind farm, and we basically were assisting that company around protests and planning objections at the same time, so to speak. Another SME, a company involved in we see cosmetic surgery, so to speak. Was engaged with litigation from a dissatisfied customer. That was maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. There's smaller businesses. Then for larger organizations, a company in the beef processing business we work for had a very serious issue 4 years ago. We might recollect the Beefburg, the sort of the horse meat and the equine DNA horse meat scandal at the time. Last year, similar, the company faced issues around beef plan movement protests. They were protesting everybody. They were also protesting retailers. A company a fortnight ago, I advised a company in relation to both internal and external messaging around a number of layoffs. It's temporary, albeit, layoffs that has had to make as a response to coronavirus COVID-19. Last year, we were engaged by the Irish Greyhound Board. There was a Primetime Investigates report that was quite inflammatory regarding the greyhound industry and the treatment of greyhounds. So, we work with that organisation and many others. We've worked with a range of we're currently working with a number of hospitals. We're working with all the HSE hospitals in Cork, Kerry, Waterford and South Tipperary at the moment, and we're working with a couple of hospitals in Dublin. So we're advising them on their communications at this particular time. Very much in collaboration, by the way. All hospital communications has been done in collaboration at the moment with the HSE.
Yeah, and the Department of
all sorts. Probably the most fun, and it's going back about maybe 12 years or so, Aoife. But the about 12 years, anybody living in Dublin will remember the toll facility at Westlink, the Westlink toll bridge, and when there was a toll barrier there. Now we work for, we still do, in fact, we work for the owner of that facility, NTR, and there was a campaign mounted, Bury the Toll campaign, mounted by then Senator Shane Ross and his cohort Eamon Dunphy, and it was a huge high-profile campaign to bury the toll and get rid of the toll. It lasted about a year, and eventually the state bought it and the problem went away, but that was a sort of almost daily crisis, so to speak. So yeah, we've done all sorts of crises. We've done a range, we've engaged in HR issues, all sorts of HR issues, and I mentioned some of them earlier on.
Okay.
Corporate governance issues, so on and so forth.
Okay, great, thanks. So just to bring you back to one of those situations that you mentioned, and it's probably very relevant for a lot of businesses, especially small and medium-sized businesses in today's market or today's world that we're living in. You mentioned about bringing a client through a difficult situation of layoffs. So obviously that involves internal and external communications. And a lot of companies have that challenge at the moment, where they're either temporarily laying off staff or they're unfortunately permanently laying off staff because maybe they have to close or whatever. Now, obviously, there's still a communications process involved in this. There's a management process and a communications process involved. So have you any recommendations, how people should actually engage with their staff in those type of situations? Maybe if you take it, maybe in internal communications and then external communications?
Yeah, well, the internal communications is very much predicated on if you like, the HR function in the company. First of all, the management decision that has the board or management decision that has been made. And then, if you like, the HR implementation of that decision. And the HR implementation will likely entail, if you like, the terms of if you want to call it a redundancy. And so I think that has to be landed on first by the company, so to speak. So that's a key part of the process. But then certainly engaging with employees is another part of that. So you have to communicate to the employees, and it's a very difficult thing. And I've seen different methods of this over the years. I've seen sort of the CEO maybe doing a town hall sort of meeting. I've seen maybe the CEO briefing half a dozen line managers, and then the line managers going out and briefing people under their sort of responsibility. I've seen written correspondence, written communications to employees, so on and so forth. But it is so important. It's vital, I think, in HR that the engagement in the first instance is absolutely with employees, so to speak. In this day and age, and in the age of live social media, so if I say something to you now, Aoife, it can be global in 5 minutes. You press a button, you say something. So in this day of sort of live social media, it's very possible, human nature, an employee will automatically post, "I just lost my job." And then 2 minutes later, you get a phone call from the HR correspondent, human resources or correspondent or employment correspondent in the media. And so but while you have to take great care in preparing for your employee engagement, you also have to be very careful and be very, very ready to deal with the media almost immediately, like you inform the employee.
Okay, and can you maybe tell the employee, is there any sort of a situation in which you could maybe tell the employee not to communicate with the media?
Yes, you can, and some, you know, a lot of the time that may relate to, if you like, if an employee is well treated when they're being left, when they're leaving an organisation, I think they will respect that, and they will likely respect a request not to say anything publicly for a certain period of time. And also, you know, somebody working in a job may have to go home and share that with a partner or a family that they've just lost their job. So maybe they don't want it out in the media space so quickly. So I believe that if an employee is well treated, I think and fairly treated, they're more likely to respect the company. But if they're not fairly treated and they're badly treated by a company, maybe they will go public, and maybe they have a point in going public.
Mm-hmm. So it's down to the company culture and the internal communication strategies that you have in place prior to the crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So Jimmy is asking a question related to that as well. He is asking that the company is actually closed, but they would like to engage with their staff, even though the company is closed. Should they engage with the staff or not?
110%, I believe you should engage with the staff. I don't know how many people Jimmy employs, but I absolutely would engage with the staff. And it doesn't matter what type of business Jimmy's in, so to speak. 50, there it is, 50. So if I was Jimmy, I would be preparing. I'm sure he has the contact information for all his employees who temporarily aren't working. But I would just go out with a message to wish them well, to say to hope that they're safe and well, and their loved ones and families are safe and well, that he's watching and monitoring the situation as it's happening at the moment, that we're respecting the government guidelines, and that hopefully he'll come back to them with further information as things develop. But I think an interim communication to any employee now, I think, would be very, very advisable.
Great. Okay. Keep the communication going. Okay. So another question here from Trish. Would you consider social media giveaways, competitions, a good way of keeping customers engaged and positive towards your business during this time? She states that her business is in children's clothing. She doesn't sell online, so she's trying to keep people interested.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a good initiative. I think there's nothing controversial about it. It's not materialistic sort of behavior. It seems to be nice, responsible, sensible behavior. The other thing at the moment, shops are like Mother Care and all of these places are closed right now, Aoife. So maybe it'd be a very nice thing to do, and while doing something good and something nice, it's also a nice way for her to promote what she does and promote what she sells.
Very good. Now I'm just going to on that note, can you see my screen there, Nigel? You might.
I can, yes.
Very good. Yeah. So just on that note, and for Trish and anyone else who might be considering communicating during a time of crisis, one of the things that we've come across at this time is, a lot of businesses have something to say and they want to get out there. They want to get out to their employees, and they want to get out to their staff, and to their external audience as well, their stakeholders. And I think it's really important for businesses at this point in time to be seen to be, doing something good, and not to be profiteering from this, not to be profiting from this type of situation. So if you are communicating, and if you are, planning to promote, you want to get the message out there, and you do have something good, you have children's clothes and people still need to dress their children. It's important to put the message out there, but just be very clear when you're putting the message out there, and be seen to be putting it out there for information purposes, and not to be seen to be trying to make a buck on it. So something that you'll see quite a lot in crisis comms is, this concept of the 5 C's or the 3 C's or whatever you want. It's a good way of remembering how to communicate in a crisis. But maybe just think of that when you're communicating at this point. So to be clear. So number one, clarity, be clear. Be clear in your communication. It's not a time for spin. This is not a time to start spinning a story. Just give people the information they need. don't use jargon. You know, companies generally might have a lot of jargon or words that they use in their own companies. And it's important that you speak to the public and speak clearly to them. And you'll see that in the HSEs, for example, communication, the Department of Public Health, every evening when they're having those press conferences. You know, Dr. Tony Holohan is extremely clear. And he's doing that for a reason, because people just want the information. They're afraid, they're panicked, and they want the information. Competency, it's important to be seen to be competent. People are panicked, they might be fearful in a crisis situation, they might be afraid for their jobs, their families. So you need to be competent, and you need to be seen as trustworthy and competent. Speak with conviction as well. So try and give examples if you can, you know, examples of other situations or people who are in similar situations, and speak with conviction. And then have the courage to communicate firmly and to make decisions that are really difficult. You know, it's not a time for people pleasing, but difficult decisions need to be made, and you need to be able to communicate those difficult decisions clearly. And also, I think very importantly, especially in times of crisis, it's important to have compassion. Again, using COVID-19, you'll see that quite a lot. You saw Simon Coveney coming out at the beginning, you know, talking about his family and his friends and everybody who is older, his older relatives who were affected. You saw Leo Varadkar coming out and talking about his family who are all working in the health service. So it's really important to show that empathy in times of crisis. And you very often see in a crisis situation that the people who perform badly are leaders who don't show empathy. You know, there's a classic case of the BP scandal where there was a huge oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, and Tony Hayward, who was the chief exec at the time, came out. If you look it up online, he came out with, you know, a few thundering errors, a few statements that he shouldn't have made. One of them where he said he wanted to get his life back. You know, people around him, there had been deaths, and people around him were suffering. So it's just really important, and it didn't work out well. And it's important to remember that crisis communications, the crisis is bad in itself, but how you communicate can actually make it worse. So it's important just to remember those things when you're communicating at this time.
Yeah, just a couple of points, Aoife, on what you said. First of all, there might be another leader on the other side of I won't mention any names, but a leader on the other side of the Atlantic that might be, it might be difficult to show empathy, or he has a difficulty just demonstrating empathy. But coming back to your point on compassion and the press conference, the daily press briefing provided mostly by Tony Holohan and the HSE, and reading the report every day of that press briefing, a message that I have put in every single statement from the word go for the last number of weeks since they started those press briefings. Okay, you have the horrible statistics at the front of the media statement, but every single media statement contains the message that 80% of people that get coronavirus will be absolutely fine. You know, and that message has been repeated day after day after day after day after day. So it's basically a message to say to most people, we have to be extremely careful, but the likelihood is you're going to be fine. So that's a sort of a compassionate message as well, so to speak, in the midst of a crisis.
Yes, and that's another interesting topic as well, in relation to bad news. You know, there seems to be a lot of bad news, and when it comes to a crisis, the media seem to love bad news, but not love the good news so much. So that message might not get across as strongly as the bad news message, you know, with the amount of deaths and the amount of, you know, obviously serious things that are happening as well. So when it comes to communicating, and maybe you only do have bad news to communicate, what do you think you should do? Should you go ahead and communicate the bad news, or should you try and pretend it's not happening and deny it?
It depends on what you. If you're obliged to communicate it, I think you have to communicate it. And I think probably the best example for let's say, take park coronavirus to one side for a brief moment. But the best example of communicating bad news is by companies who are publicly listed on the stock exchange, and they're having financial issues, so they have to recast their forecast for the year and what their earnings are going to be. They're obliged to announce that, if you like, in terms of an announcement to the stock exchange. But other companies, if there is bad news and it has to be announced, I think it's really important that they do announce it. But it's not all about the bad news. Clearly articulate something. You know, we're issuing this media announcement for a particular reason. The news is not so good. However, the news is not so good for the following reasons, and there could be mitigating circumstances. And then what the company or organization is trying to do to sort of recover the situation it's landed in. So don't be afraid or shy from issuing sort of bad news. Sometimes it has to happen. And like sometimes it's important to get it done, to lance that boil, to get it done and to move on. And the other thing I've noticed so many times over the years is that companies that do have bad news on their table and they need to get it out into the public domain and public space, they're in a bubble. They're living, they're eating, living, sleeping, drinking this sort of issue. It's all they're talking about, and they're sort of with their colleagues and around their office and their key stakeholders. But they put the bad news out there on a given day. 48, it might be really bad news for a big company. So it will go, it might happen, it might go out on a Tuesday. So it'll play out in the papers Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It'll come again in the Sunday papers, and on Monday it's dropped off a cliff. It's forgotten about. So news is very, very cyclical, and it's revolving and it's moving all the time. So I think that while it might be very sharp focus for the company, it may not be sharp focus for all the audiences or the consumers of the news that are seeing the news.
Yes, okay, thank you. So we have a question there from somebody who's anonymous, but they are saying, I think this is really more a human resources question, that they can bring people back on a phased basis over 6 to 12 months. Do they have to choose the longest in service? I think that's probably one for HR. Yeah. So,
I think it is one for HR.
Very specific.
Absolutely.
I mean, so we're focusing really on communications. In this side of things. So we'd come in after that decision has been made, really. So we have two on another IFA. We have two online sites, a furniture and nursery. We have been very reluctant to sell and push products. We are a small family business, second generation, 43 years, and they're very careful. So they're very careful not to ruin their reputation. So this is back to what we were saying about communicating, but not to be seen to be trying to benefit from the situation. So how would you suggest this person, Aoife, communicates?
Yeah, first things first, I think she should, I'm sure she has her again, being cognizant of data protection, so on and so forth, but I'm sure she has a list of her customers, so on and so forth, and a list of people she can communicate with. But in terms of, say, doing business, for companies that are closed at the moment, and might be logistically, if you're a furniture business, clearly it's quite logistically difficult to do business because of the size of furniture. But I listened to, and people will probably hear, if they want to, if they didn't hear Bobby Kerr's program on News Talk on, it was Brendan O'Connor on RTE, and I think it was Sunday, and he had the head of Guaranteed Irish as a guest on, or a panelist on his program, and he was interviewing her. And they were giving some examples of Irish SMEs and companies and what they're doing and how innovative they are in terms of selling product and getting out to the market in the current environment. And I think he interviewed 2 or 3 people, and there are 2 or 3 really good stories there. But any organization that's in business that has customers or stakeholders, it doesn't matter what the organization is or company is or what it does, I believe it should make either proactive effort at communicating with its audiences, or a more passive effort. And passive is just, if you like, putting something on the website, putting something on social media channels, so on and so forth. But do communicate and do tell them you're there, and do tell them you wish them well. And you're hoping that this will move on, and you'll be back in direct contact with them in the medium term.
Yeah,
not saying short term.
Yeah, and that's it. And I think to Aoife, I would say that's very important. It's important to get your message. I mean, there was a demand for your service. The people haven't gone. There's still a demand for your service. So it's important that you just communicate, but communicate clearly. Provide people with the information rather than the hard sell, and that's really what people are looking for at this point in time. Okay, so Let's see what else. I think maybe just to give people, if you can hang on there, Nigel, for another second, just to give people maybe an idea, and we will provide these notes afterwards as well, but just to give people an idea maybe of how to put together your crisis plan, you know, some things to think about if you are putting together your crisis plan, or your crisis communications plan, should I say. And obviously there's two parts to a crisis. There's the management part, the logistics, you know, where you're making decisions about your layoffs and all that kind of thing, unfortunately, if you have to. And then there's the communication side of it. And when you're communicating, it's very important that you know your media. So if you are attempting to communicate through the media, then to an external audience, it's very important that you know who your media are. You know what type of media you'd like to communicate in. If you'd like to communicate, you know, over online, like we're doing now, or, you know, television, radio, Skype, as Nigel was mentioning there, many people are doing many media are doing interviews through Skype at the moment, online and social media. And social media, I think, is where a lot of people are turning to at the moment, especially in times of communication from brands. But also there's been a bit of a backlash as well against, you know, all the fake news and the disinformation that's happening through social media as well. So it's important that you use that wisely if you're using it. It's important to know your journalists as well. So if you have a bit of time in this downtime that some of us unfortunately have, or some of us are busier than we ever have been, maybe do some research on the journalists who are relevant to your audience. You know, if it's if you're in the fashion business, if you're in beauty, try and find out who the lifestyle and beauty journalists are in your field. Understand the publications or the online channels or whatever it is that they write for, and try to get familiar with them. So at least you have, you know who you might like to get in touch with and try and communicate with. Think about the top line of your business. What is it that you would like to say? What is your business communicating? If you only had one thing to say, what is it that you would like to say? And a lot of businesses, you know, they might be interviewed by somebody for 5 minutes, might be interviewed by a journalist for 5 minutes. And the only bit that's broadcast is maybe just, you know, a minute or two, or even less at the very beginning. So if you're only going to have one thing that's broadcast, think about what it is that you would like to say. And very important, have 3 key messages. So when you're putting together your crisis comms plan, you should have 3 key messages, 3 things that you want to say, and you keep referring back to these, and you can weave them into every answer really, or most answers. If you find a difficult question, you know, you can always go back to your key messages if necessary. And very, very important, you prepare your questions and answers. So think about those difficult questions that you do not want to answer. Think about the questions you would like to answer and how you might like to answer them. But then the difficult questions, the ones you don't want to answer, the questions that, you know, how many people are you unfortunately having to lay off? You know, is your business going to recover? Are you going to open again? They're very important questions that you should have an answer for if you're attempting to speak to the media.
And Aoife, I'll just come in briefly there around a crisis plan, and as I said, a lot of SMEs will be quite small and they won't be calibrated, if you like, to have crisis plans in place. But if anybody is of mind to produce a crisis plan and maybe prepare for something that hopefully will not happen down the road, but any organization or company should be, before, if you like, it starts planning, probably needs to conduct an audit of the risks that are relevant to that audience, to that company. So you know, maybe an exercise to do, or for any SME, would be to sort of identify, you said three key messages. What are the 3 key risks that are the most, what are the 3 biggest risks to my business that I do not want to happen to me? You know, there's 3 risk areas, and that could, if something happened in these areas, will create a crisis for my company. So identify those 3 key, those risks in the first instance, and then your planning can, if you wish, be calibrated to respond to those particular risks. And if something else completely different happens, it can be amended, if you like, to address that different thing that happens. So I think it's very, very important to identify your risks. Completely understand and know your audiences. And you talked about the media, but for example, who are the key audiences for my business, so to speak? So if I end up in a crisis, who am I obliged to contact? Who do I need to contact? And you maybe have a prioritized list as well. Who are the sort of maybe tier 1 and tier 2, who are the tier 1 people I must call now to explain that something has happened in my business, or tier 2, oh God, I'll call them out of courtesy tomorrow when it's less busy, type of thing. So that's really important.
Right.
So there's just a couple of, if you like, additions to what the good things you were saying there that I agree with.
Yeah, thanks, Nigel. And I think with the best risk assessment plan in the world, I think many businesses wouldn't have factored in a pandemic for 2020, but nonetheless, that's where we're at. So I have a couple of more questions now as well for you. We have so this person is anonymous actually, but we are in the crisis now. Looking back with learnings, what can businesses do to be able to prepare for a crisis? Not very often not knowing what the crisis will be. I think we've answered that actually in terms of putting together your plan, doing your risk assessment. This person is asking, Nigel, yeah, what can businesses do to prepare for a crisis, not knowing what the crisis will be? I think we've just answered that question.
Yeah, I agree, and there are some basic rules of thumb that you've just gone through, and I gave some pointers as well, Aoife. But I think the sort of the organic response to a crisis can be either good or bad, and some organizations and companies will take a crisis and say, gosh, this is we are where we are, but we're going to make the most of it, and they'll develop a response to the crisis, if you like, that's suitable and relevant to their business and organization. They may at an operational level change something the way they do to respond to the crisis as it's happening at the moment. I know of a company that's sort of involved in, for example, it's involved in the area of the destruction of aged hardware from data centers. So used computer mainframes, it's sort of involved in their destruction. It cleans the data out of them and it sort of puts it back into the system. And that business is stopped at the moment, but that company has been engaged now, rather than, if you like, carefully destructing hardware, it's now constructing or building or assembling ventilators, so to speak. Okay. So it was creative enough to be able to go to whatever powers that be, maybe the HSE or wherever, to say, listen, we can do this for you, and it's got some business arising out of that fact. But also from a communications point of view, that's very much an operational example. But from a communications point of view, I think don't be static. Be proactive from a communications point of view. We talked about the various platforms and the various methods and manners of communicating a company can get engaged in, and do that. And if the company, if you like, if it's very much a consumer type of business, if it deals with consumers very frequently on an ongoing basis, it's got direct consumer customers, I think frequent social media engagement and updates is quite important. And just keeping in touch with its customer base to show them that you're alive and well and kicking, but also showing them that you're communicating with them and having that sort of engagement with them. So I'm all in favor of proactive and active communication at the moment, irrespective of the status of the company. Also, and we talked about, there are going to be failed businesses, and there are people that are who basically are working, they were working a month ago in companies and maybe owning companies that will no longer exist. But they will come back again. They'll come back in some capacity, or some guys, maybe in the same sector, maybe doing something very similar. But as they're known at the moment now, they're if you like, gone. But I think it'd be really good for those people in that very, very difficult and challenging situation to proactively engage with their contacts, so to speak, to let their contact know they're there, just to wish that their contacts well, and just to keep the communication going, because they will be back. Remind people they're there, and to remind people they're going to be there in the future, so to speak. And I thought that email from the Park Hotel in Kenmare was really good, and it was thinking about it. It's clearly a company that's in distress at the moment. It's closed, but that message wasn't thinking about the Park Hotel in Kenmare, it was thinking about all its customers, so to speak.
Yeah, very good.
This message.
Very good. So there's somebody here who is also an anonymous participant, and they're involved in a consultation business that provides services to the hospitality industry. So obviously one of the industries that's in big trouble at the moment. This person wants to promote the business. It's only a startup, but they want to do it sensitively, which is really important, as we've mentioned. Conscious of doesn't wish to devalue the service to others. And what approach would you recommend in this current situation?
Okay, difficult. It's difficult to launch, like it's very, very difficult to launch a new business or service in the current environment, unless you're launching a new business or service to that relates to the response to the crisis we're in at the moment. But it can still be done, and if it's in the hospitality space and hospitality sector, the company, and it sounds to me it's a consultancy business that's providing consultancy to maybe hotels, restaurants, and so on, tours, so on and so forth. So what it needs to do is basically know where its audiences are and identify, if you wish, the channels to those audiences. So if it's in the hospitality space, there are media, certainly things like sort of Vintner's World, licensed and catering news, Hospitality Ireland. There are those type of publications I think it can engage with. But there are also, I'm sure, online portals as well, and other things that company can do. For example, where is it providing its service to? So, for example, if it's going to be difficult to get cut through in say the national media in Dublin at the moment, I as an exercise on Saturday, I went to the Irish Times and the first 11 pages, including advertising related to COVID-19, the first 11 pages were completely coronavirus COVID-19. So companies are going to find it very difficult to get through in the national media. So maybe what it can do is calibrate its sort of message on a regionalized or localized basis, on a county by county basis. So where are there a lot of hospitality, sort of a lot of hotels, a lot of restaurants? So maybe Galway, maybe Kerry. So have a look at the Galway media, the Connacht Tribune, the Galway Advertiser, Galway Bay FM, Kerry's Eye, the Kerry Man, Radio Kerry, so on. So maybe do the trade media and localized regional media, also social media as well. So the company, I think, can do a good package of communications, if you wish, around reaching its target audiences.
And there'll have to be, the hospitality industry in general will have to, even for example, stunningly beautiful country such as Italy that has never really had to market itself much in recent times, will probably have to launch a whole tourism plan all over again, So you'll find the hospitality industry will be reaching out to people who can advise and help them in these situations. Okay, so any other questions coming through?
All right.
Yeah, so we will have questions. We will actually,
Sorry,
one more, sorry. Yeah.
There might be one more there. From
I see one there. Sorry, this has come in. Lorraine Daly. Retailer with online presence, how can we put forward without a hard sell? Yeah, okay. So an online retailer, how can they put forward without a hard sell?
Yeah, well, I think they're probably, in terms of being in commerce and business at the moment, they probably are best calibrated to deal with the situation that we are in at the moment, somebody in the online retail business. So which is great from a commercial point of view. I wouldn't be overly shy. I think you have to be as I said earlier on, I think tone is important at the moment. But everybody has a right to sell the products and services that they are selling to consumers. And everybody, we're seeing examples of it all the time. I agree with hard sell. Hard sell very much is advertising, and it's above the line, so on and so forth. But you can do a very good program of proactive communications on behalf of the business by let's call it soft sell, so to speak. So it's just, do you have anything interesting to say about your business at this time? Are there new products, or the new services? Is it a new strand? Are you doing anything particular in response to COVID-19 coronavirus? Do you have a special offers or anything like that? And just use the platforms that you have, use the social media channels that you have in relation to your business, and promote it that way. And the other thing, like, if the company does have sort of a good customer base on a nationwide basis, and it's got a sort of, coming back to what I was saying about the hospitality company, maybe it can calibrate some activity in relation to the local media in each of the counties. Maybe those counties, particularly where it has a large customer base, so to speak. Again, difficult for companies to cut through in the national media at the moment.
It is. It's very hard, and even with all the media working at home, it's very hard, even from a PR perspective, to get in touch with the if you're trying to get in touch with a radio team or anything like that. Everybody's working from home, so the journalists are probably delighted that the PR people can't get in touch with them as easily as they might have done before. Just another question there from Aoife, not myself, another Aoife. We won a big business award the week this all happened, and should we communicate or wait until we return? And definitely, I think that's something that we're back to the communication and how this is communicated. I'll let you answer that, Nigel, and I'll come in at the end.
Yeah, and I think time is moving on, and like the situation is evolving, and it's still a deeply serious crisis that we're in. But I do think the time will come for the media that will start looking for more general content again. And I think we're beginning to see, I think, good evidence of that can be seen actually on some social media channels, and particularly on LinkedIn, where companies and organizations, I'm beginning to see, if you like, more business as usual type of information and content on particularly on LinkedIn, without recourse or with not relating to corona. These are talking about themselves, their products and services again. So I'm not sure. Congratulations on the award, but depending on what the award is and what vertical you're in, maybe it's something you can do. Certainly do it on your social media channels, and again, depending on what sector you're in. Is it the food sector? Is it the environmental sector? Is it manufacturing? Doesn't matter. There will be some media that's relevant to your sector, and what part of the country are you from? So maybe if you're outside Dublin, maybe there's a local a newspaper that you can target in your county, so on and so forth. So I think yes, I wouldn't have any issue now about commencing a little bit of that type of communication at this point.
Yeah, and I just to add to that, I'd be there's no problem in communicating, and the reality is that, as Nigel was pointing out there, the newspapers, online, offline, print, radio, whatever, media channels, they are looking for stories or something that's going on that's not related to coronavirus or COVID-19. So it is a good time to do it, but again, you want to protect your reputation, and you want to make sure that your reputation doesn't suffer. So I would very much recommend that you go out, you approach that with, some sort of intro that says, well, this is a very, difficult time for everybody. And in light of that, we're thinking of our customers, our clients, whatever business you're in, our customers, clients, friends, family, and wishing you all well. We wanted to take this opportunity just to let you know about something that's happening in our something that happened before the crisis hit in our organization. We won this award. Rather than in normal times, you might go out with, yay, we won the award, brilliant, a little fireworks attachment to your post on social media or whatever it is, but now is not the time. So it's back to, this is not the time. Be clear, be informative, and don't be seen to be, acting in an inappropriate way at a time when which is so gravely serious for so many. But definitely, it's still a time to communicate. Just communicate sensitively. So I think we have Do we have any other questions? You're welcome. So no, there's no, congratulations on the award, by the way, as well. So there's no other questions. So what we might do is, if that's it on the question front, just to thank you very much on my behalf, and Nigel also, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for your time, and we'll hand you back to Eilish in the Graduate Business School.
Thank you so much, Nigel and Aoife. That was absolutely great. I've been riveted sitting here listening to it. And I think actually Aoife, who sent that last question, had asked us earlier. So she's online retail and nursery. And she'd been asking earlier about how to manage that reputation thing. So I think what you've just answered there gives her the perfect answer on both questions of, you know, not going for the hard sell, but also, you know, kind of bringing positivity in these challenging times. So yeah, absolutely fantastic session. Thank you so much to Nigel and to Aoife. Now we had a pretty fulsome Q&A there. So we aren't going to necessarily have a post Q&A session unless there are a lot of queries that come in to myself or Michael via email. But if you reflect on this session and you do have questions, get in touch. So send them directly to myself or to Michael. Both of our email addresses are on the course page on griffith.ie, and we will liaise with Nigel and Aoife and get those answered for you in some other forum. And there was one query that couldn't be answered in this forum, the question that was more of a HR issue. And it got me thinking. I mean, we have a number of sessions coming up in the area of management of your people and leadership and motivation and so on. But what I will do is look to get a specific HR discipline expert to come in on one of those sessions, or to record a video to put up on the website separately if we're stuck for time. So if you have those kind of queries, I think it was a question in terms of how you bring people back after a layoff period. Again, send me the areas, the queries that you're having for your business, for your particular business, and we can facilitate them through other sessions. So we've put together the 10 webinars, but they are just one part. They are just one dimension of the service that we're offering over these next few weeks. So please do keep those queries coming in. So sincere thanks again to Nigel and Aoife. I hope you enjoyed that session. I also hope you'll join us tomorrow when we have a session on analysis and planning, and looking at making smart decisions, I suppose, evidence-based decision making. So that will entail practical tips for small businesses, and we'll also examine some of the larger data trends in the market. So it's a really good opportunity now, if you aren't doing too much, even with social media analytics or anything like that in your business at the moment, to maybe learn some new things that you could be doing to improve how you're making decisions in your business. And for that session, we are going to be joined by Emer Hannon, who's MD of Hannon Travel. She was name checked on Monday, you may recall, by Stephen when we were talking about getting those distributed workers, I should say. Stephen gave out to me, getting those distributed workers working remotely. And Emer's case was one of the case studies he discussed. And we're also going to be joined and facilitated by Michael Bozenet, who is a strategic consultant, founder of Radar Insight, and one of my wonderful team in the Graduate Business School as well, and of course co-lead on this program. So he's been working behind the scenes up until now, but he'll be joining you directly tomorrow for that session. So we look forward to seeing you then. Until then, stay safe and well. Do look at the online resources on griffith.ie, and do keep those queries coming into me by email. It's great to hear from so many of you over the last couple of days. So thank you and take care.